They're making an American Squid Game, but is that really the best choice? Which country would have the deadliest Squid Game, and can we design those games for them? Let's find out. Hello Internet, welcome to Film Theory, the show that would rather be wearing a red jumpsuit. Green just isn't my color. So, Squid Game. Man, it feels like Season 2 just happened, and we're probably gonna be waiting a bit for Season 3. Like here, let me check my notes, see when it's coming. Wait, it's coming out next week? Gee, sure feels like they filmed one season and then split it up into two for branding reasons, doesn't it? Anyway, yeah, Season 3 is right around the corner, and don't you worry, we're planning to complete our How to Beat Squid Game trilogy as soon as we can. I'm like literally dropping everything to write that as soon as the new season goes up, so yeah, subscribe if you want to make sure that you see that when it goes live. And hey, actually, while I'm thinking about it, we're also trying something new with playlists. Apparently you can like vote on videos in some of them now. In the description, you'll find a link to a playlist where we're testing out this feature, and we're trying to figure out what your favorite film theories are. So yeah, go check that out, upvote your favorites. I'm pretty sure some of the Squid Games are in contention there, and I'll check back in with y'all about it in the future. Anyway, in the meantime, as we wait for Season 3, there's another big piece of Squid Game news that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, while the South Korean version of the show may be coming to an end, that obviously isn't going to be the end of the Squid Game brand. Like, you really think Netflix is gonna let this cash cow have a peaceful retirement, sipping mojitos as the sun goes down? Nah, dog, they're beating this thing until the dead horse is completely pulverized. I actually mentioned this in one of our last Squid Game theories, but late last year, rumors swirled that Netflix was making a spin-off of the South Korean series set here in the good old US of A. They've apparently even managed to get David Fincher, director of classics like The Social Network, Seven, and another one that we can't talk about, on board for the project. Obviously, this is a smart business decision for Netflix. The US has far and away the most Netflix subscribers, so it feels like a no-brainer. But is it the best decision? See, market size is not what made the South Korean show so popular and compelling all across the world. South Korea has just 1/6 of the population and 1/13 of the subscriber base as the US does. No, when you really think about it, a big part of what made Squid Game so gripping to watch was, well, the games. Watching grown adults play simple kid games with deadly consequences is just good TV, and while there are plenty of US kid games that I can envision making a great addition to the series, is there another country that might be a better choice? So here's what we're gonna do here today, friends. This episode's gonna be a fun, lighthearted, unserious one, looking at the games from around the world to see where the Squid Game spin-off should be set. And then, at the end of it, I'll design the perfect Squid Game for that country. Will the United States come out on top, or bottom, depending on how you look at it, or will an underdog like Lithuania or Azerbaijan take home the crown? Get into your jumpsuits, friends. It's time to discover which country would have the deadliest Squid Game. Now, before we start announcing the Squid Game host countries like we're some sort of twisted Olympic committee, we should probably lay down some ground rules. First off, clearly we cannot talk about every single country in the world in this video, and if we're leaving something out, that doesn't mean that we didn't look into that country and its cultural children's games. That being said, if we left something out that you actually think would make for a killer Squid Game event, please let me know in the comments. I'll be looking at them, and hey, maybe we'll make some awesome shorts out of it or something. And secondly, we should probably figure out what actually makes for a good Squid Game game. Obviously, not every one of them can or should be a test of strength and endurance. Otherwise, it'd be less Squid Game and more Ninja Warrior. Loved that show, by the way. Shoutouts to the OG Japanese one on G4. But when we look at the list of games that appeared in the first two seasons, we can broadly fit almost every single one of them into at least one of three categories, which I like to call the 3 Ps. First up, you have the physically based games like Tug of War or the titular Squid Game, but there are others that test a variety of other skills. There are games of precision, where the hand-eye coordination is the key to victory, like the cookie cutting game from Season 1 or Gongi from Season 2. Then there are psychological games. These are more a mental battle between the players and or the game makers, creating great drama as the characters either work together or betray each other to win. Think like Glass Hopscotch from Season 1 or the Mingle game from Season 2. Of course, many of these games can fit into more than one category, but if your country is going to be the host for the Squid Game, you're going to need at least all three types of games. So in our search for who should be the next host of the Squid Game, we'll be looking for games that fit into these three broad buckets. So let's start out with the first P, physical games. These are some pretty universal games popular amongst a lot of countries. If you grew up in the West like me, you can probably think of several immediately. I'm talking stuff like hopscotch, dodgeball, foursquare, mainstream sports like football, soccer, basketball, basketball. Each of those could have crazy outcomes if we Squid Gameify them. But if we look back at Asia, there are some other games that would make for some killer competitions specific to those nations. For example, check out Botaushi from Japan. This game was technically created as a training exercise for the Japanese military, but it's also occasionally played amongst school children. I'm not really sure why. I mean, just like, look at this. Actually, you know what? I take it back. Middle schoolie would have loved this. And like, let's be real, I'm not sure I've ever seen a game begging to be included in Squid Game more than this one. Here are the rules. Players are divided into 2 teams with team sizes as big as 150 people. Half of each team will be defenders and half of them will be attackers. The defender's job is to raise a pole and then do everything in their power to prevent it from being brought down. Meanwhile, the attackers do everything in their power to knock down the other team's poles. The first team to bring down the other team's pole to 30 degrees or lower wins. And I don't know about you, but I can already see how this would make a great, dramatic, early game in a Japanese Squid Game to kill off like a bunch of the extras. Of course, Japan isn't the only Asian nation whose beloved physical children's games could lead to some high stakes. This is Thailand's coconut shoe racing, and, well, it's exactly what it sounds like on the tin. 2 halves of a coconut are tied together with a string, and all you have to do is awkwardly hobble your way to the finish line. The key is maintaining your balance while also keeping enough tension on the string. Of course, if we're hosting a Thai Squid Game, players would have a set amount of time to get across rough terrain, and if you step off of your shell or don't make it across in time, blammo. And of course, no discussion here would be complete without heading to Africa, which has dozens of countries with rich cultural traditions and games. For example, in Ghana, there's a game called Pailolo, which translates literally to time to search for. The premise here is that one person secretly hides an object, like a stick or a specific rock, in an area. Then all of the other players race to be the first person to find that object and bring it back to safety. Now, unless we plan on playing Pailolo as the final game, we're gonna have to have multiple targets for players to go after. But just imagine the drama here. The items could be of varying sizes and weights. You could find a really heavy version of the object early on, but is it worth trying to lug it slowly back to safety but risk running out of time, or trying to find something smaller? Or maybe you want to rush out and find a smaller object, knowing that you'll be the target for other players if you find it early. Or maybe you could be the ambusher here, attacking someone who found the object early on. There's just so much potential. But okay, the more I'm looking into this, the more I am realizing that most countries have excellent options for these sorts of physical games. I haven't even mentioned awesome options I found for Brazil, India, the Middle East. We'll need something to narrow this down a bit more, but thankfully we have to remember this isn't Ninja Warrior or the Olympics. This is Squid Game, and the games here aren't exclusively about testing your physical skills and ability. No, some of the most iconic and nerve-wracking moments of the series emphasized our second P, precision over power. So where in the world can we look for this? Well, if we head over to jolly old England, we can take a look at a classic game like darts, a popular pub game about throwing darts at a very small target. Seems like exactly the sort of thing that could be its whole game, or part of a larger marathon like we saw in Squid Game Season 2. Or maybe we could even do tiddlywinks. Yes, go ahead and snicker, it is a very funny word. I know that sounds like the sort of weird old Victorian era parlor game that Brits would love, and well, that's because that's exactly what this is. Tiddlywinks dates back to the late 1800s, where players are given plastic discs called squidgers, and their goal is to try to flick smaller discs called winks into a central cup. No, I didn't make any of that up. It is the most British sounding thing you could possibly imagine. But it can get seriously competitive. Like, not only has there been a Tiddlywinks club at Cambridge since 1955, but there's even a Tiddlywinks World Championship held every year. But if you want something with a little bit of a lower skill ceiling, then we can head over to Italy with the old school game Bottomuro, which translates roughly to wall beater. Yeah, this one should be fun. This game was really popular in the 20s and starts with one person throwing a large coin against a wall, hoping to bounce it off of the wall. Each player then takes turns throwing smaller coins, attempting to bounce theirs as close to the first coin as possible. So yes, this game would literally have your life come down to the flip of a coin. But if that sounds too tame for your liking, well, then would explosives liven things up for you? Let me introduce you to Tejo, a bar game super popular in Colombia where you throw large stones at packets of literal gunpowder. Already sounds awesome and could make for some crazy Saw-like Squid Game machinations if that gunpowder like lights fuses and eliminates opponents. But perhaps the ultimate game of precision, and one that I think is almost universal, pickup sticks, also known as jack straws or Mikado. The origin of this one is disputed, with some sources saying it comes from ancient China, while others cite various other ancient civilizations, but the modern version emerged in Europe in the 1700s. Regardless, just imagine, a pile of sticks is plopped in front of you, and you need to remove a single stick from the pile without disturbing any of the others. And if you do, well, rest in peace. And narrowing this down has been a bit harder than I expected. We still have a nice collection of countries with games testing physical skills and precision abilities. But the real insane side of Squid Game comes out when players are forced to play mind games with each other. Is there something here we can use to narrow this down even further? Well, let's take a look at our third P, psychological games. And oh boy, there are plenty of these around the world. A good example? Mafia, also known as Werewolf, or more recently, now, on the off chance that you haven't played something like this before, Mafia is a game where one or a small number of people within a group are the bad guys, and it's their job to kill the good guys without their identities being revealed. I mean, do I need to say more? It's Among Us, but with like real killing. This is perfect for the Squid Game. The original iteration of this was designed at Moscow State University in 1986, so it would make a perfect addition to a Russian Squid Game. Another option, this one based on the psychological impact of multiple players, the traditional South African game of Mbube. In the playground version of this game, all of the kids gather in a circle while two are chosen to play at a time. One is dubbed the Mbube, the Zulu word for lion, while the other is the Impala, a type of antelope. Both are then blindfolded, and the lion tries to find the Impala while everyone chants Mbube, Mbube, getting louder as the lion gets closer to its prey. Sounds fun, but if we're going to Squid Gamify this South African classic, well, players may have to draw cards to see who's the lion and who's the antelope. The one who wins gets to live, and the crowd around them gets to choose how much they help or hinder the lion. This would be a perfect mid-game elimination of half of the remaining contestants and would be just absolutely brutal. You know, after looking at all of these countries, at all of the awesome games that we could adapt for the Squid Game, I don't really feel any closer to figuring out who should be the next host of the Squid Game. I mean, just about every country has great children's games that could be turned into a deadly sport. That's gonna work regardless of the culture that came up with them. So maybe there's something else about the South Korean Squid Game that made it must-see TV both for us in the real world and the billionaires in the story. And well, after thinking it over a bit, I think I found that special sauce. The games are important, yes, but perhaps even more important, the players. Look, let's be real, for the vast majority of people like you and me, we'd never ever in a billion years sign up to participate in something like the Squid Game. $33 million is just not enough of an incentive to play your silly kids games where my odds of dying are over 99.7%. That math just ain't mathin'. But here's the thing, the players in the Squid Game aren't just ordinary people. No, they're desperate people. They all need that cash for one reason or another. They all need that money, whether it's to help their family, to pay for their own bad choices, or to fix their severe financial debt thanks to unfortunate circumstances. To get someone to basically throw their life away and refuse to end the games early just for a shot that they might earn a large sum of money, their backs have to be against the wall, and then some. And thanks to the way that South Korean society is currently set up, it's not entirely surprising that there are enough desperate people to fill out a Squid Game roster every couple of years. Now, obviously, I'm an outsider here, but based off of my research, South Korea consistently ranks amongst the worst in the world in terms of household debt relative to their country's GDP. That's basically just how much money the country makes overall. Essentially, this means that ordinary Koreans have a lot of debt, mostly because of their high credit card usage and South Korea's unique housing system, where renters can be forced to take out massive loans in order to put down a deposit for a lease. Sometimes these loans can be as much as 50 to 80% of a home's value. So even non-homeowners are saddled with tons of debt because of that housing. They also rank among the lowest of all developed nations in terms of social spending relative to their economy, and they have an extremely competitive culture that bleeds into every aspect of their lives, even as kids. So if we really want to find the home of the next Squid Game, maybe the best way we can really narrow this down is by looking at countries facing similar problems who have similar cultures. And if we're looking for high levels of personal debt, a weak social safety net, and an ultra-competitive culture, well, does that sound like any country to you? Yeah, as much as it pains me to say this, and believe me, I tried really hard to find another answer, if we're looking for the country most fitting for a Squid Game spinoff, well, it's the one that Netflix already chose, United States of America. Whether it's credit cards, mortgages, car loans, student debt, whatever, Americans are just drowning in debt, with the American people having a gargantuan combined $18.2 trillion in household debt. And that's without mentioning calls to gambling hotlines skyrocketing thanks to the rapid expansion of online and sports gambling, or medical debt thanks to a lack of a single-payer healthcare system. This is a fact that just breaks my heart, but around 40% of Americans say that they'd have trouble paying an unexpected $400 bill. And depending on who you ask, somewhere between a third to a half of all Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And all of that combined creates plenty of people who might risk it all in a Squid Game just to get out. So, okay, Netflix's producers might have actually been onto something here. American Squid Game is a good fit for the franchise if they insist on spinning it off. So what would the actual competition look like? Well, based on the first 2 seasons of the Korean show, the Squid Game is generally split split into 6 rounds. For my purposes here though, I'm gonna go through 7 rounds because everything's bigger in America, and give a couple options for each round. Because you know that they're just gonna do multiple seasons of the show and you might as well have options, right? So let's go through this, shall we? First round, I say we keep red light, green light. I mean, this is the first round we saw in both major Squid Games so far, and it's also a popular American children's game. This would keep some iconic imagery from the original series in this new American spinoff, and also lets us kill off most of those extras early on. Seems like an obvious choice, so we're leaving it here. For our second round though, if the first round is to show that there can be mass casualties in a physical-based challenge, this second round should take things much smaller. Only a small handful of players should be put in danger from this round, and the risk should come from something based in precision or psychology. My choices here? Well, this game should either be Jenga or Tag. Basically, the remaining players get split into a few groups and forced to play a few rounds of either game. Jenga could be a fantastic showcase of precision, and if a time limit is imposed, just think of that drama. Tag, on the other hand, would test our players' psychology. If you're it, do you go for someone weak but likable, or someone strong to eliminate the competition early, but risk incurring their wrath if they survive? It's good stuff. For the third round, I want to bring in something physical again, but has an element of the other two Ps. My choice? The floor is lava, where contestants have to get across a room by climbing on furniture and walls and not touching the floor. Because, you know, the floor is actual, real, literal lava. First off, this would be visually stunning, and secondly, just think of the drama here. Contestants will have to physically cross this area, all while deciding to help or hinder other players. Some routes through the lava pit could be direct but take a lot of physicality, while others could take less precision or physicality but take much longer. And if worst comes to worse, well, murder could easily happen. This is a slam dunk of a game, and if you ask me, I would bet that this one would become instantly iconic. For our fourth game, I think there are a couple directions we can take here: musical chairs or Duck Duck Goose. Basically, these are the same games with different twists. In musical chairs, there are a series of chairs that the players must walk around while music's playing, and when the music stops, they have to fight to sit down in one of the chairs. But there aren't enough chairs for all of them. In Duck Duck Goose, the players are already sitting, while one of the players is not, and selects another player to be it. That silly goose must then chase the player that selected them around the circle, and if they get around to the circle and sit down in the newly empty slot, that selected player must now do the same thing. As you can see, they are very similar games, and if you add a time limit, well, there's where the drama comes in. This lets us whittle down the player count very slightly while also dealing varying levels of psychological damage. Because in one game, the players have to fight each other to sit and survive, and in the other, they literally have to choose who dies. For the fifth game, I think we should create something similar to the tug of war from the first Squid Game, a game with two very large teams where one half is eliminated. And thankfully, there are plenty of options for us to do here. At first, I was thinking dodgeball would be perfect, and while that might still work, it may be more dramatic if people are literally being eliminated and offed as soon as they get struck by a ball. Capture the flag could also work very well, but I think the one that makes the most sense? Red Rover. In this game, the two teams link arms with their teammates and then call for a member of the opposing team to Red Rover, send that player right over. That player then runs at the other team and tries to break that chain. In our Squid Gamified version, the team with the most points at the end would be the winner, and the other, well, they'd be red for another reason. For the sixth game, as we're approaching the end of our Squid Game, we need one that will allow the game makers to have as many or as few winners as they want at the end of it. The first season of Squid Game only had 2 players in that final game, and if I were a betting man, there will probably only be 1 or 2 survivors left standing by the final game of season 2. The penultimate game here will need to allow for that, and I have a couple of options. First up, Simon Says. Here, players follow instructions given to them by a game master, but only when they say Simon Says, followed by the command. If they don't preface it with that phrase, you're eliminated. This one could get really creative and difficult too, even with the tasks actually given to the players. What if Simon says to do something like really difficult, or tells you to kill another player? It's potentially brutal and could be stopped at any time when they reach the desired number of remaining players. And secondly, we have Hide and Seek. In this one, I'm imagining all of the players being taken to a large warehouse space full of places to hide as the game masters try to hunt them down. And if they're found, blammo, they're deado. Again, a lot of fun strategy could be had here. Do you stay in the same spot if you think it's a really good one? Do you risk running to somewhere already searched in hopes that it won't be searched again, but risking your neck to get there? Do you sabotage or help other players? There's so much that could be done, and again, it could be ended as soon as the desired number of players is reached. And now, for the 7th and final game. If we're following the model from season 1, this needs to be a 1v1 game that can be incredibly dramatic. My first thought went to rock, paper, scissors, but they've already done that in the show, and then to thumb war or heads or tails, but that might be a little lame. So what what I ended up settling on? Tetherball. In this game, a ball is tethered to a large pole by a rope, and the two players try to wrap the rope around the pole by hitting the ball. The first one to get it wrapped all the way in their direction wins. I mean, just think of the potential cinema here. Rain pouring as the two players who have been through hell together fight for their own survival, going for hours and hours and hours until finally one of them fails and is eliminated. Just potentially beautiful and heartbreaking, man. And that, my friends, sounds like the perfect recipe for a truly great or truly terrible American Squid Game, depending on who you ask. I'm just saying, Netflix, I am available. Hire me. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Up next on Film Theory. Is player 456 from Squid Game actually broke?